Ever get that feeling? You know, when you want to learn something new, but just thinking about where to even begin, it's like intimidating.
Oh, totally. Like staring at a blank page or one of those 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzles. Where do you even start?
Exactly. And that's what we're tackling in this deep dive. We're going to figure out how to create a sort of roadmap for learning. And get this, we're using the harmonica as our guide.
Now that's an interesting twist. I'm intrigued.
Right. We're taking inspiration from this musician, Otavio Castro. He wrote this guide, A Construções de Rotinas de Estudo. It's all in Portuguese, so good luck finding it anywhere else.
Ah, so our listeners are getting exclusive insights here. I like it.
You got it. And thankfully, we have our expert here who can translate not just the words, but also the really insightful stuff underneath. So Castro structures his guide in 3 phases. And the first one, I gotta say, threw me for a loop. Calibration, he calls it. He spends so much time, like an almost crazy amount of time, on single notes before even thinking about playing a melody. Why? It's like saying, okay, before you run a marathon, you need to perfect how to stand on one leg first.
It seems counterintuitive, right? But that's where Castro's idea of técnica do esforço mínimo comes in. It means like the technique of minimal effort. He's all about finding that perfect balance, the absolute minimum effort you need to make a good, clear, strong note on the harmonica. Efficiency and control from day one.
It's like that saying, work smarter, not harder, but applied to music.
Exactly. And he breaks down this whole calibration phase even further. 3 main elements: tuning, timbre, and projection.
Okay, so tuning, that's straightforward, right? Got to make sure each note's actually, the right note.
Exactly. You can use a tuner, a keyboard, all sorts of tools out there these days to make sure you're hitting the right pitch.
Makes sense. But timbre, what's that all about?
So think of it this way. You got 2 singers, both hitting the same note, same pitch, perfect tuning. But one might sound, I don't know, warm and full. The other one kind of thin, maybe even a bit harsh. That's timbre, the color of the sound.
Ooh, okay. Like
Yeah.
the difference between like a cheap guitar and a really nice vintage one, even if they're both technically in tune. So timbre is like the sound quality.
You got it. Creating the right texture, the feeling for the music. And then there's projection. This is all about breath control, having enough lung power to hold those notes, control how loud or soft they are without relying on microphones or anything.
Wow, so much goes into just playing one note well. I had no idea.
Right. And that's why Castro spends so much time on this in the beginning. It's like he's saying, you can't build a house on shaky ground. You need that solid foundation first.
That is a great analogy.
And, that's the thing about learning from the real masters in any field, right?
Mm-hmm.
They get us to pay attention to those details, the things we might normally overlook that actually make all the difference.
Totally. So we've got our foundation, our calibration phase, but how do we actually start making music? That's where this whole idea of articulation comes in, right?
You got it. Articulation. This is where the magic happens. It's like the bridge between those perfect individual notes we were talking about and, well, actual music.
So time to string those notes together. Let's get this harmonica party started.
Exactly. Castro, he focuses on connecting those super well-calibrated notes into these short musical phrases. It's like, remember those Lego blocks we were using as an analogy before? We got all these individual pieces. Now we start putting them together to build something cool.
Okay, I like where you're going with this. So it's like, I don't know, learning a new language. You start with the sounds of the letters, then you're putting them together into words, and eventually you're forming whole sentences. Except here, instead of hola, it's more like amazing grace on a harmonica.
Right. And just like learning a language, you've got to practice.
Yeah.
Castro, he's a big believer in the metronome for this phase.
Ugh, the metronome. Takes me back to piano lessons when I was a kid. Tick-tock, tick-tock.
Right. But it makes sense, even beyond music, if you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about developing that consistency, whether you're playing an instrument or writing code or even cooking a meal. It's like this built-in quality control, making sure everything's got that evenness, that flow.
Yeah, like having that internal rhythm no matter what you're doing keeps you honest. But I do have a question about this whole articulation thing. The harmonica, it's not like a piano or a guitar where all the notes are laid out in a straight line, right? Doesn't that make it trickier to connect everything smoothly?
You're hitting on a key point here. Castro talks about this too. He says that with the harmonica, getting those smooth transitions, that consistent phrasing across different keys, it's not a given. It takes extra work. It's like, imagine trying to navigate a city where all the streets are kind of wonky, Yeah. You got to learn the shortcuts, the back alleys to really get around efficiently.
I like that analogy. So it's like the harmonica has its own kind of secret map of sounds.
Yes, exactly. And the good news is, Castro gives you the map. He's got specific exercises, techniques, all designed to overcome this particular challenge. It's not just general advice, it's tailored to this instrument, to its quirks.
Okay, so Castro, he's officially impressed me. He's not just a musician, he's like a musical architect. He's thought of everything, designed this whole path that anticipates the bumps in the road and tells you exactly how to navigate them.
That's what makes his approach so effective. It's not just practice, it's intelligent practice. And speaking of which, that brings us to his final phase, repertoire. This is where all that technical work we've been talking about, it starts to really sing.
Repertoire, now we're talking. It's like we finally made it through rehearsals, instruments tuned, all prepped to take the stage. So is this just about playing a bunch of songs then?
It's more than that. It's about taking all that technical skill and, I don't know, bringing your own style to it, your own personality.
Yeah.
Castro, he emphasizes two big things here, interpretation and improvisation.
All right, break it down for me. Interpretation, I think I get that. It's like you can read a poem out loud, but to really bring it to life, you got to understand what it means, the emotion behind the words, right?
Exactly. It's the same with music. Interpretation is about going beyond just playing the right notes. It's about understanding the feeling of a melody, those subtle changes in tone, in rhythm that give it soul.
It's like finding your own voice, even within someone else's music. Okay, I'm with you. But improvisation, that seems a bit, well, at odds with everything else we've been talking about. Like, haven't we been talking about structure, discipline?
It may seem that way, but Castro, he argues that good improvisation, it actually needs that balance between structure and, yeah, freedom. He says you need that solid understanding of musical theory, the rules of the game, so to speak, but you also got to be present in the moment, listening to what's happening around you musically so you can respond in a way that feels, I don't know, spontaneous, but also makes sense with everything else that's going on.
It's like that jazz musician thing, right? They know the tune, they've got the chops, but then they can just riff, make it their own in the moment.
Exactly. And here's something else Castro talks about that I think applies to any skill, not just music. He says it's super important to isolate difficult passages. Basically, figure out which parts are tripping you up, slow down, break it down, and really focus on those until you got them down.
That's so smart. It's like instead of getting overwhelmed by the whole thing, you zoom in, conquer the tough bits, and suddenly the whole thing's a lot more manageable.
Right. And you know what else Castro emphasizes? Having fun. He ends his guide with this phrase, divertisse sempre. It means like, have fun always.
I love that. It's so easy to get caught up in, I don't know, trying to be perfect and forget to actually enjoy the process.
It's true. And, thinking about this whole conversation, it's amazing how we started with something as specific as the harmonica, but we've ended up with this framework, thanks to Otavio Castro, that you could apply to learning anything.
Right. It's like he's giving us this master key, and now it's up to us to go find the right door to unlock with it. So here's a little challenge for you, dear listener, as you're going about your day. Think of something, a skill, anything you'd love to learn or get better at. Could be baking, could be writing, could be, I don't know, learning how to have a really great conversation.
Got it.
Now imagine, how would you apply these three phases, this calibration, articulation, repertoire, to that? What would your own personal version of that look like?
What a great question to leave our listeners with.
Right. It's like
Yeah.
we've given you the tools, now go out there and build something amazing. And who knows, you might even surprise yourself with what you're capable of.
And until next time, keep learning, keep exploring, and most importantly, keep having fun with it.
That's a wrap. We'll catch you in the next episode of The Deep Dive. Happy learning, everyone.